Shabbat Tov, everyone. Welcome to video number 108 in our TillesTells Stories for Saturday Night WhatsApp group. I compiled and adapted this story from two articles on LachaimWeekly.org. I titled it, More Enlightened Than the Enlightenment. In the White Russian province of Mohilev lived a humble Jew and his wife. Life in Tsarist Russia wasn't easy, but in spite of everything, the couple would have been very happy if only God had granted them a child. They prayed for years and even made the long journey to their Rabbi Schneur-Zalman of Chabad in the Vitebsk region for a blessing. Finally, their prayers bore fruit, and they became the parents of a charming little boy. Not only was he attractive and appealing and child, he was possessed of a rare intellect. The boy absorbed information. Seeing or hearing something only once was enough to imprint it in his memory. In addition, the most complex philosophical concepts were comprehended at once. The boy soon outstripped all his tutors that his parents had hired for him, and instead he sat alone every day in his room, studying and making great progress in his studies. By the age of bar mitzvah, he was a master of Talmudic wisdom. His parents were as happy as could be. One evening, the father entered the son's room. To his shock and dismay, he saw that the boy was reading one of the books of the Enlightenment movement, which disparaged Torah and Jewish tradition. Although his heart was racing, his father spoke to his son calmly, in a voice filled with warmth and love. "Why are you reading this, my son?" he asked. "Father, don't think it's because I'm interested in their ideas. I just feel I need to know how to refute them. As it says in Pirkei Avos, you have to know how to refute the heretics when they speak." Pirkei Avos, chapter 2, Mishnah 14. The father was skeptical, but he patted his arm and said nothing. Over the next few weeks and months, the boy was caught several more times. He was silent when confronted. The words of his broken-hearted parents seemed to make no impression on the boy. Eventually, he left home, after calling his father an idiot for his religious convictions. His destination was faraway Berlin, the seat of the Enlightenment, where he intended to study mathematics and science at the university. When he arrived in Berlin, he was soon recognized as a genius. So brightly did his intellect outshine the other students. He excelled in his studies, and after several years he had written 2 original scientific treatises which were about to be published. One dealt with an original mathematical theorem he had formulated. The other was on anatomy. In addition, he found a girl whom he wished to marry. Suddenly he remembered his aged parents, and had an urge to obtain their blessing on his proposed marriage. He also wanted to show them his scholarly manuscripts and prove to them that he had succeeded in his chosen endeavors, despite their disapproval. But then he reflected, how could his parents, totally uneducated in secular ways, begin to fathom the depth of his brilliant studies? He decided a better idea would be to make a detour and show his manuscripts to Rabbi Schneur-Zalman instead, of whom it was reported that he had studied geometry and astronomy in his youth. Certainly he will appreciate the depth and insights of my writings, he told himself, and of course my father will respect the opinion of his Rebbe. The young man made his way to Liozna and presented himself at the Rebbe's court, an unusual sight with his beardless face and Berlin garb. Reb Moshe Meislish, a well-known sophisticated chassid, approached him, inquiring what the young man was seeking. He replied that he wanted only a private audience with the Rebbe. When the Rebbe was told this, he agreed, and the young scholar was ushered into the Rebbe's room, his 2 manuscripts clutched tightly in his hands. The Alter Rebbe and the young man were closeted in his study for a long time. When the young scholar finally emerged, he was extremely agitated. He started pacing back and forth, lost in thought. It was obvious to the others waiting to see the Rebbe that he was in the midst of an inner battle. Suddenly, without warning, he grabbed one of his manuscripts and threw it into the furnace. A minute later, the second one followed. Both were quickly consumed by the flames. Only then did he calm down. Rabbi Meislish came running over to find out what had happened. The young man composed himself further and answered, "My 2 manuscripts were well received in Berlin. The Rebbe, however, simply looked at the first 5 pages of the mathematics treatise, made some notations, and quickly flipped through the remaining pages. Then he did the same with the second work, on anatomy. When he finished, he looked at me with penetrating eyes and said, 'Young man, your book is very well written and soundly reasoned. However, both are seriously flawed, for there are errors in your basic premises.' I was shocked to my core. I had spent years perfecting these works. All my professors were highly impressed by them. I started to argue my point, but I was forced to stop. For try though I may, I simply couldn't refute his objections to the paragraphs he had marked. I left the room completely embarrassed, and I continued turning over in my mind the Rebbe's critique. I sorely wished to justify myself, but I realized that I simply couldn't. The Rebbe was right on every point. That's when I threw my precious manuscripts into the fire. The young man remained in the court of the Alter Rebbe, who had offered to study Torah daily with him personally. He made extraordinary progress, but 7 weeks later he fell ill, and a short time after that passed away. Rabbi Schneur-Zalman later revealed that the young man was a reincarnation of Rabbi Elazar ben Dardaya, a notorious sinner whose unusual and dramatic repentance is discussed in the Talmud, in the Avodah Zorah, Daf 17, side A. He also explained that Ben Dardaya's soul had already descended into the world several times previously, each time following the same progression. As a young man, it would faithfully observe Torah and mitzvot, but as time passed, it invariably deviated. As an aside, interestingly, as a proud resident of Tzfat, allow me to add that the Holy Ari of Tzfat stated that Elazar ben Dardaya was himself a reincarnation of Yochanan HaKohen Gadol, the high priest who towards the end of the period of the Maccabees became a heretic on the last day of his life at age 80. There's no guarantees. Since he was righteous until his final day, he could not be punished in purgatory. However, since he became a heretic on his final day, neither could he enter paradise, Gan Eden. Therefore, he came down as a reincarnation, as Elazar, to rectify his sin. This time, continued the Alter Rebbe, I refused to let him leave until his soul had accomplished its final tikkun, its rectification, and was qualified to enter the heavenly realms.